you need to try to lead by example, and you need to try to understand, how to walk in your employees and your team members' shoes just enough to be dangerous at least. So, for example, if you have a team of medical science liaisons and you expect them to go out and engage 3 to 5 clinicians per day, 4 to 5 days a week out in their regional territory, that's actually quite difficult to do in this environment. And what do you think is a robust discussion? They all want to go out and have really meaningful face-to-face interactions with them. So, and then the boss comes out and works with them. And that medical science liaison puts up the perfect day. They're taken in the various offices. They know where the coffee shops are. They know how to get right into the top key opinion leader. And then the boss walks away and goes, wow, your job is really easy. You just walk around talking to people about science all day. See, I think it's better to be like, for a leader sometimes to go back and say, let me pretend that I'm going to have to do this job for a day and learn from that person. What exactly did you have to go through to make this perfect day for me, and kind of walk me through that, and then teach me some of the skills that you did to get those appointments.
Hello and welcome back to the Pharmaverse Podcast. I'm your host, Michael Pietrack. You just heard a really great leadership insight from Jonas Hylton, PharmD, the founder and CEO at Executive Biotech Advisors. Prior to starting his consulting firm, he spent 25 years in pharma, spanning commercial, development, and medical affairs leadership roles. So let's dive right in and let's see what other leadership advice he has for us. Jonas Hylton, welcome to the Pharmaverse. You're one of the most outgoing people I know. And so I was really surprised to learn that shyness was something that you had to overcome at a young age. You got to tell us that story.
Yeah, it was really, really kind of weird. Growing up, I was super quiet, super shy, couldn't approach anybody, couldn't give a presentation in front of my 6th grade class, 3rd grade class, senior class, couldn't do anything. And then I went to college and thought, oh, I can reinvent myself. And when I went to college, I was still really, really shy. And I realized that I was missing out on things in life, right? I see these happy people hanging out together, doing a lot of fun things, giving great presentations, getting ahead. And I thought, why am I not like that? And I said, it's just a conscious decision. So one day I just woke up when I was 22 years old and I said, I'm not going to be shy anymore. I'm going to be outgoing. I'm going to be happy. I'm going to smile. I'm going to laugh more like the people that I want to mimic. And so I just woke up one day and started doing it and started practicing and turned from a glass half empty person or a shy introvert to a person that sparks conversations with random people, hopefully in a non-creepy way. But, just started putting myself out there. And so I always think that, people can reinvent themselves if they want to. And so I tried it and it worked a lot because now people meet me and they go, you were shy? I'm like, yeah, deathly shy.
I would have never thought that. I would have never thought that, knowing you, that you were shy. Again, you're like one of the most outgoing, gregarious people that I know. Was there anything else besides just making the conscious decision that you had to do when you said practice? Like, what does that really mean?
Yeah, because you can't just wake up one day and be like, oh, I'm going to be an outgoing, happy person, especially if you're like, you don't have the confidence in yourself, right? We're always very self-deprecating, right? I don't like the way my hair looks. I'm a balding guy. I started losing my hair in high school, right? And,
Poor thing. I'm so sorry for you.
yeah, yeah. Maybe some people know the same way, but see, you look good with your head shaved, right? But, when you don't have that confidence, and we always pick ourselves apart, I just realized that, a great personality and an outgoing person, if you ever saw somebody like, wow, they may not look good, but man, that personality, the personality of the person, I look past that. And so I thought, wow, as long as I'm engaging and start talking to people, but you have to practice it. So, I didn't just wake up one day and was like the perfect outgoing person. I stumbled, I did things. So I started forcing myself to do things that I was uncomfortable with, like talk to somebody when you're standing in line at the post office. And you quickly realize that, you don't want to say anything off track, but you might ask them a question you don't know about the post office, and they're able to tell you an answer, and they're happy to share their advice and their insight. So most of the thing is a lot of times you just ask open-ended questions of people on a topic that they probably like to talk about. And then you listen and try to be attentive to that. And that's something that takes practice.
Yeah, it does take practice. One of my best interviewing bits of advice that I give to people who are, self-proclaimed introverts is the day of the interview, try to spark and start up some conversations with strangers so that by the time you move into that interview setting, you're already in extrovert mode. What do you think about that advice?
I think that's great, sparking and you're right. The more you practice, the better you're going to get at it. And, there's books about that. To be honest with you, I've never read one of the books because I have a short attention span as well. And so, but these things of, 2-minute podcasts, taking expert advice from people like yourself is you want to listen to those people. I had the benefit of being raised by my grandparents, and my grandparents were very, very active people in the community. And so I was around a lot of retired people, and I learned at a really young age, don't ignore the young people and push them out of the way and be mean to them. If you're nice to them and you sit and listen to these people that have lived a full, robust life, they always want to give you information. They're trying to tell you, don't make the same mistake that I did. Try and do this in life. And if you listen to them and then apply those types of things, it was very, very instrumental. So I did dig into that, kind of like thinking about, the elders. In a lot of communities, elders are very respected throughout history. And if you do the same thing in life and then you apply that, you really learn a lot of stuff. You can actually probably help yourself get ahead. And that's what those people often have to offer. That's what you're offering people when you say that, Michael, which is great advice.
Appreciate that. So let's stay with your grandparents. What's the number one bit of leadership advice that either of them gave you?
Yeah, they were always like, kind of like a see one, do one, teach one approach. So my grandfather was a very skilled carpenter, and he was a union carpenter, and he was a really hard worker, and he was really, really good at carpentry. And so I can't do anything. I just don't have the gene. So it was very frustrating for him to, hey, we need to go out and build a shed in the backyard. He had to tell me to do everything, and I didn't want to be there and I didn't want to do it. And later one day I woke up and I thought, this is his area. This is really important to him. I need to at least try and, understand why he likes it so much. So what he did was he said, watch me do this. So I watched him do one. Then he helped me build the shed. Then later on, he said, please go out and build this other item for me. And so he actually practiced that instinctively. He said, see one, do one, teach one. And so then when it was time to go do the shed, it was a big project and I had to do it myself. So what did I do? I recruited my neighbor friends that were there to help me do it. And then I had to teach them how to do it to get the job done because he gave me a limited time to be able to do it. So he did it instinctively. So that see one, do one, teach one, I know it's a philosophy that's out there, but I really think that that's something that they both instilled in.
It's great. That's a great little framework too. So I think I'm going to apply that in a variety of areas of my life. So thank you for sharing that. Within pharma, you have such a diverse leadership background, and now you're running a very successful consulting firm. What would you say is the number one leadership mistake that you see leaders making?
Yeah. That's a really difficult question. I really think that there's kind of a couple of things that are there. Number one is that you really need to help drive the process, right? We talk about leaders with a vision, leaders who, install motivation on their team members, and you need to do that. So you need to paint a vision, but I also think you need to try to lead by example, and you need to try to understand, how to walk in your employees and your team members' shoes just enough to be dangerous at least. So for example, if you have a team of medical science liaisons and you expect them to go out and engage 3 to 5 clinicians per day, 4 to 5 days a week out in their regional territory, that's actually quite difficult to do in this environment. And what do you think is a robust discussion? They all want to go out and have really meaningful face-to-face interactions with them. So, and then the boss comes out and works with them. And that medical science liaison puts up the perfect day. They're taken in the various offices. They know where the coffee shops are. They know how to get right into the top key opinion leader. And then the boss walks away and goes, wow, your job is really easy. You just walk around talking to people about science all day. See, I think it's better to be like, for a leader sometimes to go back and say, let me pretend that I'm going to have to do this job for a day and learn from that person. What exactly did you have to go through to make this perfect day for me? And kind of walk me through that. And then teach me some of the skills that you did to get those appointments. How did you know where to go? And kind of understand, walk a mile in their shoes. Even if you don't have time to do it, at least stop and listen and ask the person how they set up such a great day. And I think a lot of leaders don't do that. They're so focused on raising money, driving the company, motivating the team members through their words. They often don't stop and see, like, what are the little things that the team members are doing that make them successful and that you're asking them to do. Then when you understand that a little bit and you say, I need to raise it up to 5 interactions a day. And then you tell them the why. as well. And then you think, how hard would that be for me to do that when I went out and worked with that person? Could I really set up 5 appointments day after day with these top people like this person did?
I'd like to take a moment just to thank our sponsors. First, K. Bassman International, your premier recruiting resource in the pharma industry. And secondly, Executive Biotech Advisors, an outstanding consulting firm in the biotech arena. Now, back to the episode.
Well, let's talk about another leadership framework that you employ, the 80-20 rule. We usually think about this in a business mix concept, but how does this apply to leadership?
Yeah, the 80-20 rule, we all know about that, right? In sales and marketing, they say, 80% of our business and our top revenue comes from the top 20% of our customers. What I do is like in the business world, especially in the pharmaceutical industry, you have to constantly push yourself out of your comfort zone. You have to push the envelope. You have to drive the initiatives. And that's what we want in the industry, to not just sit back on our laurels and go. Let's say you're in medical, and then you have your marketing, your commercial, your market access, and then you have your senior leadership as well. And you have basically 3 different sets of customers that you report to. Well, what you want to do on all of those people, especially your colleagues in different divisions and your senior leadership, is show the great work that your team did. And you want to motivate your team. Well, what happens is when you're pushing yourself, you have to motivate your team with your goals and objectives, your strategic, hopefully lead by example, be personable, be respectful, but also you need to drive initiatives. So I feel like when you're driving something, if you push too hard and 90% of people don't, or 30 to 40% of people don't like you because you're pushing them too hard, and they're like, oh, here comes Jonas again. With his initiatives, and he's pushing too hard, and only 60, 70% of people are behind you, you probably need to change your approach a little bit. But also, if you're out there and, let's say 90% of people like you and everything's going really well and they like the work that you're doing, you're probably not pushing hard enough. You can probably push a little bit harder. And so what I'm saying is about 20% of the time, you're probably not going to get along with people just because you have different personalities, or maybe that you're pushing too hard for the way that they learn in your different style. But if you start shifting those 80-20 to where like you're just pushing, all of a sudden 30, 40, 50% of people aren't liking you or pushing back, you're pushing too hard. You need to change your approach. So I feel like 20% of the time you're going to ask people to go out of their comfort zone, work harder than they need to, or work harder than they currently are. And it's okay to push that 20% because there's just different settings. But if you push too hard and you get into 30%, you need to back off a little bit or change your approach with that person or that team.
That does make a lot of sense. It reminds me of this quote from Casey Stengel. He was a baseball manager for many years. And he said, the key to management is keeping the people that hate you away from the people that are undecided.
That's a perfect one. Yeah. My 80-20 rule is very similar to that, only, you want those people to want to work with you.
So another leadership framework that you use that I think is really cool is how you get feedback from your employees. You have a very specific way about that. Can you teach us how that works?
Yeah, no, thank you for bringing that up. After being, in corporate America for 20, 25 years, you always have the annual performance review, the mid-year performance review. How are you doing? We want quantitative and qualitative metrics and specific things that you contributed to. And then you realize and you need to give people feedback, and you need to constantly raise the bar to hopefully improve people or make their soft areas, not soft. So they're stronger, and we're just naturally strong at some things, naturally not strong at other things. But how do we balance that person out and give them opportunities? So one of the things I learned really, really well is people don't like to get feedback the exact same way that I like to get feedback. And that's a problem, because if I get feedback the way I like feedback, it doesn't land well with some people. So what I do is I sit down with them and I say, there are basically 3 different ways that people like to get feedback. Number 1, I call the sandwich method, and it's the most popular. Here's what you did really well. Here's where I think you need to improve. And then here's what I think you did really well. Now go get it. We put the constructive criticism or the negative feedback in the middle. We sandwich it in between the two goods. That's about 70, 80% of team members seem like they prefer that type of feedback. But me, I'm in about the other 10 to 15%. I only want negative feedback. And the reason I want negative feedback is I want to know where I need to improve. So I'm going to assume everything is good unless you tell me negative feedback. Negative feedback in the United States is very difficult to give to employees in a corporate environment because it's often seen as harsh. So I have to set rules. Number 1 rule is when you give me negative feedback, number 1, I can't get mad. Number 2, I can't hold it against you and bring it back up. And number three, I might ask some clarifying questions because I really want to understand why it's negative. And the reason I'm asking is so I can figure out how to improve myself. So I literally lay out these rules when I sit down with a person. And number three is what I call the overly positive feedback. I've only had one team member in all the years who wanted to have positive feedback. So I had to go, not a sandwich method. Here's what you did really well. Here's what you do well. And here's what you do really, really well. They heard what you did well in their mind was a negative feedback to them, and they only focus on that. And so I had to think about that. So there's three different ways. There's the sandwich method, the negative, and then finally the positive. I think it's really important to ask the people, how do you like to get your feedback? Then when we sit down and do their performance review, or they say, how did I do? I always pause at that time and I go, remember, we've had conversations of how you like to get your feedback. Do you want the sandwich method, the negative, or the positive? What would you like right now on this? Because I want to give it to you. And part of the reason I did that is because early on in my career, I would give people honest feedback when they say like, well, why didn't I get the job I interviewed for? And I would say, well, you didn't get the job because you bombed the presentation. They were mad at me for years and years and years, and they held that grudge against me. And I was just trying to give them positive feedback to make them earlier. So that's why I use that approach.
Yeah, that's interesting. It reminds me of this book I'm reading actually right now. The golden rule is treat people how you want to be treated. But the book that I'm reading is called The Platinum Rule. And the platinum rule is treat people how they want you to treat them, and it's like give feedback the way they want to receive feedback versus how you would naturally give feedback. So that makes a lot of sense. But speaking of another book, I know we both sort of employ this method called the Entrepreneurial Operating System, EOS. And one of the premises of the book is the visionary leadership is basically there's a visionary and there's an implementer. A visionary and an implementer. And on my team, I'm the visionary, and then I have another guy named Jim that's the implementer. I know on your team, you're the visionary, Samantha's the implementer. But how have you seen that work, and how can other leaders utilize that practice?
Yeah, I think it's really important. Like you said, you've already identified that you're a visionary. And I think that's the hardest things, because one of the things is I didn't realize I was a visionary for a long time. I just thought I was a really hard worker who liked to move things along and always had a lot of ideas on the way to hopefully try to improve it or make the work easier. I didn't realize that not everybody thinks that way. So it's hard if you're a visionary and you tell people the 10 things that you have in your mind and then ask them to go implement it, that they can't. And the reason they can't is because they're implementers and they want to know all the details. And I don't always have all the details. I'm like, we'll figure that out along the way, So, and that actually scares people and makes it so that they can't be advantageous in their job. So I feel that, Michael, your assumption is great. I think that you are such a visionary with your podcast and the various things that you do and run your business, that if you don't have implementers to stop and make that reproducible and scalable, it's just designed to fail. And ideas are a dime a dozen, as they say, but having a vision is also very important, and being able to troubleshoot along the way is really important. So I really do like that plan of having an implementer. And I also feel, even today, I said, Michael, can I bring Samantha on the podcast with me? Because just by having her present and knowing that I have some checks and balances with her, that she has to now take the work and then make it reproducible and make it scalable so I don't have to think about it anymore, so I know that it happens appropriately, is a lot of work on her. And so I hate to, promise or tell people things, and then I'm like, then I look to my implementer to implement it and make it happen. They have to be able to see what's going on and be able to work with you. And so I rarely go anywhere with her. And she actually, told me to sit up straight and not use my hands too much and not talk too long today, because she knows I get so passionate about, just talking about visionary things like you're asking about.
Well, I think it's really great hiring advice. If a person identifies themselves as a visionary, and it's not like you have some amazing skill, it's just you have all these ideas and ideas keep coming and you need to offload these ideas, and there's no way for you to have any pull through on all of them. But if a visionary leader hires an implementer that can distill the 10 ideas, let's think about the one that we can actually implement, and that person puts together the plan for the pull through, then magic can happen on that team. I've seen it myself, and I see it a lot happening with EBA right now, Executive Biotech Advisors. So hats off to Samantha there.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, she does a lot of work, and and also it's nice as well to listen to the implementers. They actually have great ideas because they're thinking about longevity, how to recreate it, how to standardize it, how to make it successful, how to make it value to other people. And it's not always about solving the problem. It's about how making something you already have just work. And I really think that is the balance that they bring. It's kind of like, my wife keeps me in check. She's like, she's always a check and balance, and the kids always go, well, what would mom say if you did that, dad? She's my implementer as well. And I think we all probably have somebody special in our lives that's a visionary or an implementer, but it's important to introduce them and respect them. And we always sit down on the, how do you want to get the feedback as well? And it's really different, the feedback that I give to an implementer than a visionary and how to do things. And you really have to think about, some of the other things, like what's in it for them as well.
Yeah, I want to actually, that's one of the things I want to talk about, because I've been using this acronym that you taught me, WIFM. I use this thing 3 or 4 times a day. Everybody's like, what's WIFM? Well, I don't want to steal your thunder. What's WIFM?
Yeah. WIFM is, I heard it somewhere along the way. It means what's in it for me, right? And WIFM is really, really important. And so I've learned over the last 5 years when we started Executive Biotech Advisors that, we're trying to sell a service. I believe that we do it better than anybody else. I was 20 years, couldn't find anybody, a good consulting firm, a good team member, a good whatever. And I was like, what am I missing? How come I can't find a company to help me? And, well, I wasn't doing it. So what it was I needed to find somebody who understand the WIFM, what's in it for me. So every time now that we talk to somebody, the first thing that I'm trying to do is trying to understand what motivates that person. They're thinking while they're talking to me, especially when we're trying to sell services or, do that. If they're like, why is this person talking to me? What do they want from me? But more importantly, what's in it for me? Is this going to make my life better? Is it going to make me a better leader? Is it going to make it easier? Are they going to motivate my team better? Is it going to put more money in my pocket? Because if you don't try to figure out the WIFM, what's in it for me of the person you're talking to, they're not engaged in the conversation at all. And they don't really want to listen to you. And if you can find that common ground as well, and it's mutually beneficial, what's in it for them, what's in it for you, or with them or with thee, it's really, really important. So the what's in it for me is what I'm trying to think of when I'm having a conversation with people, a business conversation especially, because I want to make sure that I'm trying to tailor the conversation to what's important to them. And if I can deliver that, it's a win-win situation.
Let's put this in a different scenario. Leader and employee, and the leader's trying to motivate the employee. How does WIFM work in that scenario?
Yeah, finding out what drives the person to be successful in their role, because everybody wants to be they want to feel appreciated by their organization and acknowledged by their peers and their leaders. And so trying to create opportunities that they can go, wow, what's in it for me? Some people are motivated by money and financial. Well, that's a very different conversation than somebody that's motivated by a promotion. A lot of people don't want more money and don't want to be promoted. They just want to be acknowledged for the work that they do or their contribution to the team. They don't want to be called out individual. So I think it's the responsibility of a leader to try to get to, if their organization is so big and so matrix, they can't understand the individualism of every employee, then what they need to do is they need to instill this concept in their leaders. So their leaders are applying it and can say, this is what's motivating my team. This is how we acknowledge them. This is how we really appreciate them as people. And I think learning that in an organization and then creating an environment where everybody's doing that instinctively, especially in leadership positions, is there. And your leaders also have to say, how do you want to get your feedback? And you have to spot check people and say, do you feel you're being appreciated? Do you like the work you're doing here? Why or why not? And that goes right back to the WIFM, because they're all saying, yeah, this is what's in it for me and what motivates me to work for you. So I continually bring it back. I think leaders really need to do that. And it's not just a one and done, it's a cultural thing. There's no problem revisiting it all the time. And I find that, revisiting it goes back to that. How do you like to get your feedback? I'll tell you how I like to get my feedback. So now I'm asking you. Let's have a mutual conversation about that.
It reminds me of Love Languages. Have you ever read that book, Love Languages? Like, how do I receive love? So feedback is one thing, but WIFM is what would motivate you? Like, I have employees where if I give them a monetary bonus, that would be very motivating. I have another employee that if I gave him Friday off, that'd be really motivating. Another employee, if I wrote a letter to Jeff Kay, our CEO, wow, that would be really motivating to them. And so, but if I hit one person with the Jeff Kay email, that's not going to be motivating to them, And so, and I've also learned this about being a leader, saying you get to keep your job. It's not enough with them for them to do it, right?
Yeah. That's actually demotivating. That's the opposite of what we're trying to do. But I think the level language. So the answer to your question, have I ever read the book? No. I've honestly only read one leadership book cover to cover in my entire life. And it was when I was younger, trying to come out of the shell. And it was How to Win Friends and Influence People by Dale Carnegie. Timeless book that's been updated, but it's a tough read actually. But it's very inspiring if you just take a few points away from it. But I like podcasts now and different YouTube videos where I can learn the love languages and not. So what we do now is I actually change a lot of the love language to what's the corporate love language, and how do we apply that into corporate America? It's the same type of stuff, right? Let's think about that. The other thing is I also talk a lot in trifectas. And a trifecta, I always draw a triangle. And you say, like, if you're going to remodel your house, what are the three things you look for on your new kitchen? You want it good, fast, or cheap? Usually only get two. If it's good and fast, it's not going to be cheap. Well, I've changed that trifecta model to corporate America as well to say, like, what do we look for in team members? Well, on the medical side and a lot of things, we look for people with scientific expertise, excellent communication skills, and business acumen. Most people that come out of clinical research or other jobs have two of those skills, but they don't have the third. And so how do we provide emotional intelligence in the middle, or corporate emotional intelligence, to those three different skill sets? So to your point, I'm always using analogies from popular books like the love languages, emotional intelligence, how to win friends and influence people. But I'm always trying to apply it and hopefully resonate it with the person that I'm talking to say, so they're thinking, what's in it for me at the end of the day?
I have two questions for you that I ask every guest. So the first one is, if you could go back and give your earlier self some leadership advice, what would you say?
Yeah, I would say sometimes be a little more corporately compliant and not burn bridges with my opinions because I'm a visionary. So that would be the thing. So I think that applying those and saying, like, just because you're frustrated today doesn't mean you're going to be frustrated 6 months from now. And be careful what you tell people. And because, especially if you're like a team leader or you're motivating, or even your kids at your own home, everything that you say, sometimes people stick on those words and they remember them. You may not even remember the conversation at all, but they might remember 3, 4, 5, 8, 10, 12 years ago. And everybody will tell you it's a small industry that we work and live in. And that can come back and bite you. And I don't think I did a great job early on of like really thinking about what the other person would hear and resonate, and make sure that I'm giving words of advice or criticism or compliments or, my opinion, because I am a visionary, because I have a lot of ideas, sometimes offends people and they stick to it. So be careful what you say, be smart about what you say, and be thoughtful and think about how it might resonate with the person. That's the one thing I would go back and redo.
Good advice. Let's wrap the whole thing in a bow. What is the best leadership advice that you could give to anyone?
I was even preparing for that question. And as I think about it today, I think that what it is try to practice and walk your own path and make sure you lead by example, but also you're willing to change your position as times and the people you work with change. So be adaptable, be proactive, and then, practice what you would want other people to do. It goes back to the golden or the platinum rules as well of what you're talking about. So I think it's always be motivating, innovative, walk that path, treat people like you'd want to be treated, and be proactive. I really think a lot of the things that are missing in the leadership in the professional world today is people are not being proactive like they need to be anymore. We're afraid to be proactive and we're hesitant to be proactive. And I think driving that is really, really important to do every day. Wake up and say, how do I move the needle today?
Well, you can follow Jonas Hylton and Executive Biotech Advisors on LinkedIn. But as for now, Jonas, that's all the time we have for today's episode. But on behalf of all in the Pharmaverse, I want to thank you for your time and your wisdom and your completely memorable framework. So thank you.
Well, thank you, Michael. And I really appreciate everything that you do. And I want to commend you and your illustrious career and being innovative and thinking outside the box and providing ways to reach out to people and keep them involved. And hopefully we can live up to your standards as well and keep up the great work yourself. It's amazing to be able to work with you and know you as a friend and a colleague. Thank you.
Well, that concludes another episode of the Pharmaverse Podcast. We have many great leaders lined up for you, so make sure you subscribe to the channel so you don't miss a single career-enhancing insight. But as for now, that's a wrap. See you next time on the Pharmaverse.